Welcome to the S.O.A.P Bible Study video series from Oak Tree Community Church in South Bend, Indiana. We have been working our way through the book of Numbers in the Old Testament, and we have only a couple of weeks left, but we've got some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Some neat stories coming up.
Yep.
So
yeah, exactly.
We're in chapters 21 through 24 this time.
A lot of reading, man. You got us reading a bunch.
4 chapters a week is not that long. You can, by the way, fun fact, just because if you read 4 chapters a day, you can get through the whole Bible in about a year.
Nice.
And we're doing 4 chapters a week, so that's not a lot of reading.
Yeah,
so.
no, it's not. It's not. So by now we've seen a lot of things kind of playing over and over and over again. We've seen, basically Israel rebels, God gets mad, Moses, Aaron intercede, whether it's with prayer, sacrifices, talking to God, whatever it is, and they kind of smooth things over. We know that they're wandering around the desert, and we also know that they're back to where their original kickoff point was, where not their original sin, but where they got in trouble for not sending the spies in. Spies came back and they said, "Oh, we can't go in there."
Right.
All right, fine. Your generation can't go in, so now you're wandering around.
Yeah.
Well, we're like to the end of that generation.
Right.
And they're back to basically where they were before.
Yep. So they won't go through the same entry point that they were going to at Kadesh Barnea. They're going to come around if you're looking at the map, they're going to come around the east side of the Dead Sea up, and they're going to cross the Jordan to go in instead of coming in from the south.
Right.
And so that's really what sets up some of this stories that we're going to be, this accounts that we're going to be seeing, because had they continued to just go straight up south, they wouldn't have run into the Moabites, the Midianites, and all these people. But as they come around the Dead Sea, now they're talking about working through their land. So that's really why all this stuff happens.
And it's a huge difference too. So last week we saw the rebellion of Korah. Miriam and Aaron both died, right? Just kind of setting this back up. And then we seem to skip about 38 years, and we get into chapter 20, and the nation's back, and then same old story, Israel rebels, and this time Moses gets mad.
Yeah.
Right? And Moses gets mad and disobeys God, and as a result, he was told, you aren't going to see the promised land.
Right.
Right. So this week, like you said, now they're moving forward. And they're moving through populated areas.
Yep.
So we have these populated cities, and we had seen in the past where they send people ahead and say, "Hey, we got 2.5 million people. We just want to pass through.
Right.
We won't do things. We'll pay. We'll do whatever you want." Some say yes, and some say no. So they're basically fighting their way town by town.
Right. Yeah. Yep. We've got Canaanites. We've got Edomites. We've got all these ites. That we're going to be running into here.
Yeah. But think about it from this way. I don't know how this army got trained. Okay, God's on their side. I get that. I get that part. But you have slaves that came out of Egypt. No formal training.
Right.
They definitely started an army because they took the census of the people that were in the army.
Right.
So there was some kind of training. They seem to have, metal for various things. I assume they have some swords, but they have to carry them around with them every day too. Right. So, how big is this army? All those things are questions. And how good are they against everybody else?
Yeah, and now after all of this 4 decades, now we're in our second generation.
Right.
So we'll see a census coming up here soon and stuff. But so the census was to count the number of men who could fight in the army, right? And so before it was 603,000 and change. Yeah. Right. So, it seems like a pretty big army, 600,000.
Yeah. And generally at this time, the bigger army won. Not always, but
And it was a battle of the gods and everything, which of course gave Israel the the thing. But even with 600,000, they would send in strike teams. They would send in, and as we get into the book of Joshua, we don't see 600,000, hitting these little towns.
Right.
So.
Right. So we're not going to cover, and they list town by town by town, and you can actually follow it on the map.
Yeah.
You can Google, let's see what I Googled, Bible Israel Promised Land Journey.
pretty much.
Yeah, right. And it does take the first part, but it also takes the second part too, going into or near the promised land as they're going in.
Yeah.
With the name, so
Yep.
kind of a cool thing. You know, you can Google anything now.
Right. Yeah.
Find information.
So in this week's set, we have really two. We have a downfall, and we have sort of like a hey, maybe there's something right going on. Right.
Okay.
So the downfall is there's a victory over a Canaanite city. And then they complain right away, and that's a downfall. And then there's 3 chapters of this guy named Balaam, or Balaam, which actually, if you stop at chapter 24 and you don't get into chapter 25, it actually looks sort of good for Israel.
Yeah.
So at least for this week, we've got some good stuff going on. So there's a section called Fiery Serpents.
Fiery serpents. And you think, ooh, this big section. It's like 6 verses.
It's really small.
but it is referred to, right? And I think from my standpoint, I think this is good why we need to continually read, week after week, because my version of the story, in my mind, and then reading it again has really shifted. From what it was before, and I thought I know it, thought I would have said it. So, like you said, something happens. People, why'd you bring us here to kill us? Why are we here to die? God gets mad and he sends venomous snakes.
Yeah.
Right, and the venomous snakes were biting people, and probably the bite is where the fire came from. Yeah, the burning. Yeah, and all that, and people were dying because of it. What I thought was cool, the people realized they sinned, and they asked Moses to pray on their behalf.
Yep.
And I don't know if it's the first time, but it seems to me this is the first time the nation of Israel is going to Moses and saying, we screwed up.
Yeah.
Maybe there was another one, but...
Well, but does that mean that usually Moses just jumped straight in? And he prayed on their behalf.
Yeah.
Did he not do that this time?
Maybe.
And they're like,
hey,
you're supposed to be doing something here.
Yeah. So God does something that really seemed odd to me. He tells Moses, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a fake snake. I want you to put it on a staff, and I want you to lift it up.
Yep.
And when you lift it up, and people get bit, all they have to do is gaze upon this snake, and they'll be saved.
Yep.
And my thinking is, that's what the people did, and God saved them.
That's right.
And that was the end of it.
That was that
was my end.
As far as we know.
No, that was my end of it.
Well, I know, but
okay.
In here.
Yeah. Well, true.
That's the end of it. If all you're doing is reading through the Old Testament, whatever.
Yeah.
That's the end of it.
Yeah. So here's what I think a better ending is. That Jesus Christ identified himself as a serpent, as a type of himself. Now, talking with people who study the Old Testament all the time, people always see Jesus in a lot of places.
Yeah.
In some places, I'm like, yes. In other places, it's like, I'm not so sure about that one.
Yeah.
If somebody would have told me that, it would have been, I'm not so sure about that one.
Yeah.
Except we have John 3:14.
Yep.
So in the book of John in chapter 3, and most people are familiar with John 3:16.
Yep.
So just a couple verses back before that, Jesus is talking to a Pharisee by the name of Nicodemus. He talked to him a couple times. Nicodemus definitely would have known the story about Moses.
Absolutely.
So Jesus says, just as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, what we talked about with the pole lifting it up, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, so that everyone who believes in him may have eternal life. So if you see Jesus and the snake, both were lifted up, on the pole and on the cross.
Yep.
Both basically completely harmless while they were there.
Yep.
But one only had to gaze on the snake.
Yep.
And others maybe not gaze on Jesus, but believe in Jesus.
Yeah. So in order for the people here to be delivered or healed, right?
Yeah.
They had to believe that Moses said, or God said,
This is
God
gonna work.
said, if you look here, I will deliver you.
Yeah.
And this is stupid, this is whatever, whatever. But the people who said, I believe you, and looked at it, they were delivered.
Yeah.
God said, if you look at the cross, I will deliver you.
Yeah.
And people are like, this is stupid, this is whatever. And there are some people who say, I believe you, I look to the cross.
Yeah.
And they're delivered.
Yeah, so cool. So this is why we need to continue to read, continue to mature, continue to learn new things too.
And the cool thing is Moses didn't have any clue that Jesus was going to refer to that, anything. Moses wasn't doing that. And even the Old Testament doesn't set it up like this official, look what's coming.
Right.
It's just, Jesus used an illustration. And as he's talking to like you said, Nicodemus knew this. And he's like, let me pull out some obscure story for you that but nobody's thought of for a while.
Yeah.
God's doing the same thing.
Yeah. And then I'm sure I'd been in the New Testament too, reading John 3:16 and going before and after to get the whole story, because all of chapter 3 it really leads up to that. And I know I glossed right over it. Just
Yep. And then there's your connection. Yeah.
Yeah. So the second part of the story, we have a guy, right?
Yep.
So Israel had a couple victories, and all the other nations were going, we got to do something. What are we going to do? So they're actually talking to each other. We're going to gang up on them. What are we going to do? And one guy has a great idea of, I'm going to call in a magician, a sorcerer, a seer, and have him curse Israel.
Yeah, because that's what you do.
And this guy must have been a good one.
Yeah.
Too.
Yep. He was well known. I got a couple of nations get together, pool their resources. We should be able to buy this guy's, services, and Israel's out of here.
Yeah. So this guy has an in with a god, and it turns out it's the same god.
It's Israel's God.
Yeah.
What do you know?
So how does that work?
Well, I love the fact that even though Israel has been out of the picture for 400 years, God hasn't been out of the picture for 400 years.
That's a great one.
So this guy, this Balaam or Balaam or however you want to pronounce it.
I'm calling him Balaam.
You're calling him Balaam.
You call him whatever you want.
He knew about the God of Israel. He knew about the true and living God. And apparently, he was a prophet.
Well, and he knew enough that God was greater than him.
Yep.
Because he's like, I have to just tell you what God is telling me. And he absolutely refused to go further.
Yeah, I can't curse Israel. Well, what if I pay you more? Yeah. I still can't. What if I pay you even more? Okay, tell you what I'll do. I'll open my mouth, and whatever words fall out, that's what you bought. I can't do anything that God doesn't give me to do.
Yeah. Yeah, so seems like a really great story, right? And then there's a donkey that comes in here. So
this is a great. Go ahead. This is a great one. So God tells Balaam. He says, "Fine, go with them. Okay, go with the messengers. But you're only going to say what I tell you to say." So Balaam's like, "Cool. I do what God tells me to do, and I get a big payday."
Yeah.
And so he gets up and he hops on his donkey and he starts heading out. And it says that the anger of God was kindled against him. And people are like, but
why?
Didn't he just tell him to do? I think it was sort of a test, because when God says, "Fine, go with them, but you're going to do only what I tell you to do," that's the same as...
It didn't really mean go.
Yeah, it's like, what are you doing? You're not going to curse.
Husbands make it that.
So it's really cool because he's riding his donkey, and you may remember the story. He's riding his donkey, and the donkey stops in this sort of, apparently this close area.
Right.
It's sort of
like
walled
a cliff
off.
and a wall.
Yeah. And he just stops. And Balaam's like, "We're not stopping," and he's beating the donkey and everything. And what we see, sort of the director's cut, what we see is there is an angel standing in the way, ready to kill Balaam.
With a sword.
With a sword, ready to kill Balaam. And the donkey saw it and stopped. Balaam couldn't see it, beating his donkey. And finally, the donkey turns around and says, "What are you beating me for?" Right? Haven't I always served you? And, whatever.
Right.
And you know what?
And Go ahead,
no,
because
no.
maybe I got the same thing you do. And Balaam just answers
He
him,
just
right?
answered him.
Right?
It's like-
Not that my donkey is talking, not that it's odd. He just answers him.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Maybe
that
not my
makes-
first choice.
Yeah, so that makes you wonder, what else has he seen? What else,
true.
is he okay, he knows about the true God of Israel, but he's also dealing with other stuff over here and, type stuff. We don't, he has a foot in both sides,
Right.
Well,
Well,
type
it
thing.
seems like it is. So
Yeah.
there's a big question. Is this guy a Jew? Doesn't seem like it.
Doesn't seem
but
like it.
He's not necessarily worshiping the God, but he is definitely respecting him.
Right. Yeah. So now this is our second talking animal, because we have, potentially one, back in Genesis 3, we have a serpent who talks to people.
yeah.
And Adam and Eve didn't have a problem with that. And apparently Balaam doesn't have a problem with the donkey here. So I really want to know what's going on in Old Testament times, that people can talk to animals and not freak out about
It
it.
is a thing. Yeah.
So God says, yes, I will let you pass, but, just know that you are absolutely not going to be cursing Israel,
Right.
So the guy who hired him, Balak, says, curse Israel. Balaam's like, I can only say what God tells me to say, where we heard that
Right.
before.
Yeah.
And he ends up blessing Israel.
And mostly cursing the Moabites,
Yeah.
right? Who's
Who hired him?
hired him. I was going to say paying him, but I'm not sure he got paid.
Yeah. So they're like, well, obviously this wasn't a good mountain for you to do this on. Maybe if you got a better angle.
Yeah, so they go over.
So we try over
So it
here.
was like 3 or 4 times,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, maybe you're seeing too many of them. What if we put you over on this side and you can see only a small set? Maybe you can curse just a small set of them and not the whole thing. And he's like, guys, I can only say what And then, so after that, he says, okay, this one's for free. And another blessing for Israel comes out. And then 3 curses against Israel's enemies. Yeah. He's like, those are on the house.
Yeah, right. So we see a lot of times in the Bible, stories that are very common are 3 sentences, 4 sentences. This guy gets 3 chapters.
Yeah.
So what's so important about this story?
Well, I have actually I gave myself about 4 bullet points that
See?
yeah, because it is a major this is leading up to a major downfall in Israel's history and on their journey. We don't see it in this week, but we'll see it in next week's reading with chapter 25. So it shows what I've already said. People outside of Israel still knew God. Okay, he was not part of Israel. He wasn't in Egypt. He was over here. God is still at work even outside of Israel. So I think that's a big point to take away. Number 2, I think the point that Satan and his ongoing work to destroy Israel, because let's not forget, it's still through Israel that the Messiah, the deliverer, the rescuer is supposed to come.
Right.
Hasn't come yet, at least as far as
Second coming.
Yeah,
Hasn't come yet here.
Yeah,
Right,
hasn't
right,
come
right.
yet here in numbers, as far as anybody knows. Let's not read ahead yet, right? So he's still trying to destroy Israel. Number 3, we find Israel's propensity to go away from God, fall away from God. Okay, and then we also see God's ongoing protection and blessing on Israel, even when they're falling
Not
away, even
fully
when they're
aligned with them.
So we got a victory, and then we got the fiery serpents, and we got a victory, and we got Baal. We got just this up and down all the time.
Right.
This was after 40 years, and how many times have
It hasn't changed. And like we said, the next, the first generation has basically all died off.
Right.
I mean, Moses has, and I'm sure there's been, but the majority has.
Yeah.
And it's still happening.
Yep.
Right. There's still sin that's
Yep.
happening there.
Yep. Fun fact, in chapter 24, verse 17, Balaam is prophesying about Israel. This is the free one, and he says, "I see him, but not now. I behold him, but not close at hand. A star will march forth out of Jacob, and a scepter will rise out of Israel. He will crush the skulls of Moab, and the heads of all the sons of Shet." And he keeps going on, and it is so. We've got this star rising out of Jacob, this king, this scepter.
Yeah.
And there's a good possibility that that's what the Magi were focused on when Jesus was born. They see the star and they're like, "Hey, the ancient scroll says there's a king that goes along with the star.
Let's go find the king."
Let's go find the king."
Yeah.
So
maybe.
there's a good bet that they're looking at that here.
Nice.
Yeah, a ruler will be established from Jacob. And destroy all of his people. So, and then, literally chapter 24 ends with Balaam got up, departed, returned to his home. Balak also went his way. Everything flopped. Israel wins the battle, not the physical battle, but wins. They may not have even known that these guys were doing this.
Because there wasn't a fight.
There was no fight. Yeah. You got these two guys that, no, curse them over here, and right. Israel's just doing their thing.
Right. And maybe reading in too much, but, for next week, also there may be alternative plans that have been put in place. Too.
Right. Yeah, but as far as we know, just from this week's reading, we get down to the end, we're like, okay, all right, God protects Israel. They're blessed. The enemies are cursed, and you know that Satan's not going to give up. Yeah, right. This is going to continue somewhere along the line. So,
right.
So right, like I said, you've got some big, you got some small, ups and downs, but overall, the story of Balaam is actually feels like a win for Israel.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
God wins. Yay! Everybody goes home. Unfortunately, we don't take wins very well. So, and we'll do that next week. But this week, God is faithful.
Take the wins when you get them.
Take the wins. God is faithful, and He will make Himself known whenever and wherever He wants to. And He actually is at work for Israel in this account, and they don't even know it. And so I think that's a good reminder for us too.
Yeah.
When He's at work for us.
Yeah, what don't we know?
And we don't even know it.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're grateful. And we thank Him for His protection and His blessing, even when we have no idea that He's doing it. So hopefully that's an encouragement to you, and you'll enjoy couple of these chapters this week. Feel free to share it with your friends and family, anybody else who might need the same encouragement, and we'll see you back here next time.
Bye.